Scalable OLTP database as a solved problem in the cloud, Yandex Services source code leak, system design interview survival guide in the Architecture Weekly number 53. Let's go! So as you folks really love papers, I bring a fresh, interesting one to the highlight section of this issue. Murad Deberbas from AWS posted an overview of a paper called Is Scalable OLTP Database in the Cloud a Solved Problem? The overview and the paper itself describes the shared nothing, single writer and multiple writers design of a scalable OLTP database and discusses their trade-offs. Murad also highlights that the paper fails to consider metastable errors, and I'll share a link to the paper in the text version of this issue. And the second part of the original paper is about a new database that's not that interesting, but the first part is really gold. So if you're interested in those types of database design and how they can bring these scalable OLTP solutions in the cloud, please read the paper. Big news of this week is a major data source leak from a Russian IT giant called Yandex. You can think about them as a Google rival in Russia. And of course, the reputation of the company is very bad, as it's like partially state-owned and all that stuff. But nevertheless, what actually happened is the dump of their monorepository with the size of 44 gigabytes with source code leaked to the public. The dump contains the source code of many services, configs, user-generated content like prompts for Yandex voice assistant called Alisa, and even database credentials for internal access. However, there are no trained machine learnings there, and you can't build any software from the dump itself because it requires the insider builder infrastructure. However, this is a good learning material, and Yandex immediately became the biggest open. So in order to learn how things are done in big IT companies, you can take a look at the source code dump. I know you folks read the newsletter partially because you want to be ready for a system design interview. And the third highlight for today is a survival guide for exactly this. So the article I'm sharing goes over the list of the concepts to be aware of, the architecture patterns, database types, distribution system problems, and many more. So use the paper below as a nice checklist to prepare for the interview. By the way, if you want to have an individual preparation for a system design interview, of course, you can reach out to myself, and I'm doing the private consultations for a reasonable fee. Okay, it's time for the follow-up. And the first one is the software trends report. As we just wrap up the 2022, it's good to get back and get an overview of the trends of the last year and see what we can expect in the future. In this post of the InfoQ blog, they mention the usage of architecture decision records, the importance of senior and staff individual contributor roles in the software companies, and the emerge of the platform teams. They also highlight that you would rather treat platforms and data as products and handle those accordingly. As regarding the software architecture, I have invited none other than Uwe Friedrichsen for an hour-long interview, so book your calendars. I will share a link to the event down below. Okay, next one is how to autoscale your software as a service application infrastructure. So RedHat has a series of articles on SaaS architecture checklist, and recently they shared chapter number 9, which is about autoscaling the infrastructure. Michael Hribnak explains how autoscaling can be configured using cluster API, cluster autoscale, and horizontal pod autoscaler so that your SaaS resources are truly elastic. And as we started talking about the Kubernetes, take a look at the set of the free books which help you to study Kubernetes itself, its performance, security, and overall distributed systems problems. This set also includes books on the integration patterns and other stuff. So grab the free set now. Speaking of the books, some time ago I wrote a post with the books for the software architect. And one book on the list was Fundamentals of Software Architecture by Neil Ford. He is also known as a promoter of architecture kata exercise, and in his book he shows an example of a task for such activity. So what I want to share with you today is an article with the solving problem for a particular kata in the post on Medium. So the post itself includes the understanding of the context, iterating over design versions, etc., etc. So take a closer look. Okay, next one is a very short article about documenting your event-driven architecture. The problem there is that in a loosely coupled event-driven architecture, we still want to know what events messages is a particular service producing, what events messages can a consumer get from the service, and what is the message schema, and answers to other questions. So this short article shows 3 ways how you can document the answers to those questions. Okay, and the last one for today is an article about metrics for quality. And unfortunately, the article itself doesn't contain any metrics whatsoever. Why? Well, when you introduce any metric for your software project, team, or anything else, you will always find out that the metric stops being useful due to the Goodhart's law. So So if you need to optimize your products for quality, what do? Well, if you study the quality itself, you will find out that there are outer, inner, and process quality parts in the whole picture. So the last article for today that I'm sharing with you is the one that goes through those quality parts and explains how to think about quality itself. Okay, thank you very much. That's it for today. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you really like the content I'm creating, consider to join the list of supporters at Patreon and Boosty. I want to appreciate the help of my patrons and Boosty followers. Thank you very much. You're helping to run this newsletter. And see you next week.